Hi everybody, my name is Ken Taitingfong. I am a security engineer over at Cisco, and my talk is entitled Insider Threat Case Analyses, 5 insider threat cases that I personally worked, what I learned, what went wrong, what went right from 20 years in the field. These are some of the roles that I've done. So inevitably what ends up happening is you work in the cybersecurity field long enough, you're probably going to work an insider threat case. And there's a very good chance it's going to be your coworker. So in some of the stories I'm telling, these were my coworkers. So that's why I can talk authoritatively about it. You know, I kind of jumped around. So, you know, some of the big things I've done kind of covered the gambit and a lot of different companies. Disclaimer, some of these events happened a while back. Some of the details are very, very fuzzy. So I'm not going to exaggerate anything, but I may get some of the finer points wrong. And if any of my old coworkers are in the audience, please correct me later on the details, not during my talk. Thanks.
Can I get your name again?
Ken Taitingfong. I'll have it at the end too. Why should we care in insider threat cases? So the Ponemon Institute did a study in 2022 of 278 companies, and they discovered that there were, out of those 200 some odd companies, 6,803 insider threat incidents occurred, and they led to an average cost of $15.4 million loss annually. 56% of those incidents were caused by employee or contractor negligence. 26% was caused by malicious insiders with an average cost of over $600,000 per incident. The study also revealed that 67% of the companies studied were experiencing between 21 and 40 incidents per year, versus in 2018 when it was only 60% of the companies that experienced the same number of incidents. So the short of it is that insider threat incidents cost time, money, and in some cases lives. So each year, nearly 1.5 million workplace attacks are reported, and it's estimated that about 25% of those workplace violence cases go unreported. So definition of insider threat, first and foremost, an insider threat does not have to have malicious intent or foreknowledge of the consequences for their actions to be considered a threat. In some of my cases, you're going to see that to be true. Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, their insider threat criteria, first, person is in a position of trust with the organization. They may have been given access to the organization's environment, resources, and or sensitive information belonging to the organization or its clients. The person has some fundamental knowledge of the company's goals, strategies, financials, personnel, vulnerabilities, etc. A person has ability to create harm to the organization either through malicious intent, negligence, or complacency. A person neither needs special privileges, skills, nor technical knowledge to be a threat. So also from the CISA, these are the types of insider threat categories: espionage, unauthorized disclosure of information, sabotage, loss of resources and capabilities, corruption, terrorism, and workplace violence. And just for a couple of examples, more historical examples. So John Anthony Walker, Aldrich Ames, Annabella Montez committed espionage against the United States by selling state secrets to the Russians and the Cubans. So another incident, sabotage. This gentleman, Terry Childs, was the network administrator for San Francisco back in 2008. During a security vulnerability assessment by a third party, they discovered he was doing a bunch of stuff he probably should not have been doing. And he basically quit and then did not divulge the administrative passwords for their fiber WAN. So he was holding the entire city of San Francisco's network hostage, which led to his arrest. And he ended up spinning around in jail for, I believe it was like 12 days, and ordered to pay $1.5 million in restitution. And then if anybody recognizes that little picture up there, that is the aerial photo of the Iranian nuclear power plant that was hit by Stuxnet. Widely believed to be a joint operation by multinational programmers. And depending on who you ask, the worm was introduced either by a double agent or Dutch mole. So the interesting part about it was they were able to burn out roughly 2,000 centrifuges in within a few months, and their normal burnout rate was only like 800 centrifuges. So the thought was that we set back the, well, it probably was us, but we set back the nuclear program for Iran by at least 2 years during that time.
It was a joint effort.
Yes, it definitely was. And I'm assuming these two don't need really introduction. Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden stole a bunch of classified information, handed it over to WikiLeaks and a bunch of journalists. Chelsea Manning was sentenced and then released in 2017. Edward Snowden is now officially a Russian citizen. So these are my case studies now that we know the definition of an insider threat, some of the examples, the threat categories. So this first one I call the case of the petulant engineer. So we were running weekly vulnerability scans and we got a hit that there was an outdated version of Chrome on one of our desktops. The problem was Chrome wasn't actually an approved browser on this desktop, and it was also very restricted. So we kind of had a rough idea of our pool of suspects, and there was no remote access to it. So we knew somebody was physically at the machine installing Chrome, and they shouldn't have been. So identification, the way we figured this out. So again, the vulnerability scanner told us which host it was. We were able to pull back the security logs. We were actually setting all of our security logs to our SIM. So we were just looking for an event that showed an installation of Chrome, and we found it. On Windows, right here, event code 11707. Now, this is not an actual screenshot of the incident, so I'm just using this for an example. But right here, in users, it had the engineer's username right here, right? And then right here, in that case, it said Chrome EXE, and it had the version. So, we knew who did it. But just to be safe, we correlated also the login information on Windows again. You're looking for event code 4624, which shows successful login. And then you can look at the login type. Now, we didn't have remote, so you're not going to see, we weren't going to see login type 10, but we did see login type 2, which meant interactive. And right here, logon type, and then right there again, it had his username. And timestamps all correlated. It really just pointed to him, and we knew it was him. So this was pretty short and sweet. Fallout, we uninstalled the software. We reviewed our change request to make sure that this wasn't something that slipped through. We escalated the incident to another security group that was kind of adjacent to ours and asked for an unbiased review. And the user was eventually separated from the company, is what it boiled down to. So lessons learned. Logging and log aggregation of this made the incident very easy to investigate. Now, we should have probably relayed some of our concerns about our coworker. We introduced change management, because you should, and he was very, very publicly vocal about not wanting to do change requests. And he would say it very loudly, do you want me to do my job or fill out paperwork? So he would almost brag that he wasn't going to do change requests. And lo and behold, he didn't do a change request, and it got him fired. And so role-based access controls and separations of duties also allowed us to eliminate more than half of our team. So, it wasn't really hard to figure this one out. Again, short and sweet. Any questions on that one? All right, incident 2. And I should have put this in the caveat. I am not going to purposely reveal which companies that I worked for where these incidents occurred, because I did not get their consent to go over some of this stuff. So I'll let you guys use your imagination. So case of the lost social security numbers. One day we were sitting around and we got a notice that a bunch of social security numbers got leaked, and we were basically in charge of those social security numbers to the tune of 38,000 names and social security numbers ended up publicly exposed. So the way we became aware of it, it got leaked. We got pinged by someone from the outside. Thankfully, whoever had leaked it didn't change the file name, and we were able to go through our user document stores and just look for the title, and we found it. And it was in the user profile directory, and we found out they had shared it, and they shared it with an executive. So one of our security analysts reached out, to the user and said, "Hey, what's going on with the spreadsheet? Why is the spreadsheet sitting in your user document?" And she goes, "Oh, my boss's boss's boss contacted me over email and said, hey, I need you to export the user database and give me all the names, social security numbers, addresses, everything. And she went, this is completely out of process and inappropriate. So unfortunately what she did was she replied back to the email and said, are you sure? And of course the reply came back, absolutely, hurry up. And so she did what she was told and didn't think anything of it. I think she did tell her boss or something, but it was kind of slow to figure it out. The problem was, let's see, make sure I didn't jump my slides here. The executive's email account had been compromised and no one had known. So this was not like a phishing attempt and she didn't fail a phish test. It came from that guy. So the fallout. When we realized the account had been compromised, we reset the password. We had to make a breach disclosure, including to the media. And then we had to order credit monitoring for all 38,000 plus users. And incidentally, the incident accelerated our MFA initiatives, where we were trying for years and everybody was fighting. But after this, it was like full bore, drop everything, we're enabling MFA on everybody. And as Winston Churchill once said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So, and in this case, the user was neither technical nor had privileges outside of her job. Oh yeah, sure.
On the credit monitoring,
Mm-hmm.
does the company pay for that, or does it get covered by some type of insurance?
All right, so the question was, who paid for the credit monitoring? So somewhere down here, we had cybersecurity insurance, which paid for it. And it was awesome in terms of cost because it cost us roughly 50 cents per user at the time. I've heard cyber insurance company has gotten very expensive lately. So this happened a while back. But some of the lessons learned, like again, MFA would have probably made this very, very hard to achieve. And had the user contacted the exec over the phone, they probably would have been able to squash this right off the bat, right? However, how can you hold her? You need to contact your boss's boss's boss over the phone and figure out if this is legitimate or not, especially when he's blowing up your email saying hurry up. Probably not going to happen. We did have DLP in place. Problem was we were using DLP for PCI, so we were looking for credit card numbers, not necessarily social security numbers. And end user security training wasn't necessarily useful in this case. I mean, again, it wasn't a phish, it was a compromised email account. It definitely came from that account, which we expected. And users may feel pressure from higher level executives to subvert processes. And then again, cyber insurance was cheap. I haven't looked at it lately, but you should get some if you don't have it.
Or able to.
I'm sorry?
Or are able to.
No, exactly, if you're able to find anybody to cover you. Don't ask post-breach for coverage. Yes, sir?
So it's good practice, should she have said no?
So the question is, should she have said no? Ideally, yes. But at the same time, so she was not let go from the company, and it was because everybody looked at her circumstances like, look, we understand. Cyber security insurance covered us for the major damage. She was trained. Her entire department was basically retrained. They were like, look, we gotta establish something better than you got asked by an executive to do this. And Sands had a really good quote that said basically, if a security incident occurred, it's not a failure of the person, it's a failure of process. And you should really look at your processes, right? So we went back and we were like, at first we were like, can't believe she would do something like this. And then we went, wait, what failed that led to her to being able to do this? And how do we close those holes? And so we did, so slowly. So obviously if we didn't have MFA and everybody's fighting on that, you can tell how slow everything else went. But yes, should she have said no? Probably. Are you going to be in a position to say no to a boss's boss's boss when you think you're talking to that person? We'll see. So third one, the case of the salary spreadsheet. So again, we're kind of sitting around and then we got contacted by HR and said, hey, somebody using a Gmail account just set out the spreadsheet with a bunch of salary information. We want to know who did it. From a Gmail account, really? And so what the spreadsheet had was it had the pay rates among the various contract companies that we were utilizing and kind of showed the pay disparities between them. And it got leaked to all the contracting employees. And it said, hey guys, look what these companies are paying you versus what these companies are paying you. And it caused a firestorm. And we were laughing because we're like, whatever. And so, the information itself wasn't readily available outside of the human resources or some high-level execs. So it was an incident, but at the same time, we're like, this just sounds like a disgruntled employee and, whatever. We'll see what happens. So again, it was sent from a Gmail account. We had no ability to really discover who the actual user was. We actually tried to contact the user just to see, and the account had already been disabled at that point. Google was available from everywhere. So it's not like we were going to pull web logs for like tens of thousands of users to say who accessed Gmail. That wasn't going to happen. So we were actually stumped on what we're going to do at this point, and whether it was worth investigating. And we were still trying to figure out, is this really a security incident? I mean, yeah, maybe someone accessed something, but we don't know who accessed it. But it's salary information. It's not like social security numbers or anything like that. Was it even factual? Had it been validated? We didn't know that. And again, we were really just didn't really much care about it. But at the same time, we had to because it was coming from HR. I don't know if it came from legal. I think I want the back one. So I missed something. Oh, the fallout. So several contracting employees actually quit. And were like, this is BS, I'm out. And a bunch of other contracting companies or other contractors said, you better bump my pay rate or I'm out. And I think we were talking like a significant number. So of course, HR was in a tizzy and they were freaking out. And they were like, we need to know who sent this. And we're like, dude, it came from Gmail. I don't know what to tell you. So, we were still spinning our wheels until life threw us a bone. So weird thing, while we're sitting there trying to figure out what we're going to do about this, an employee reached out to someone on our team and went, it was me. And we're like, what? Like, dude, why are you telling us? He was like, I quit. He goes, but yeah, it was me. And we're like, all right, would you mind telling us how you did it? He's like, yeah, there's this system that monitors Exchange and it uses a service account. I'm the one that set up the service account for it, so I have the username and password. So I've been really kind of reading all of the execs' emails for months, and no one even knew. And the funny part is we didn't know the system existed. We didn't know the service account existed. So this guy's browsing God knows what, but he was like, yeah, you're welcome, I'm out. And he was like, and so we were like, okay, we would have never figured this out. So thank you, I guess. And so, yeah, that was the end of that. And I think he just changed the password on the service account. So lessons learned, you should know all your service accounts, because we didn't. And you should be able to identify when those service accounts are used interactively. That's the important part, right? So for like Windows, you're looking at like logon type 2 or logon type 10. For Linux, you're probably looking at like SSH access from like your DHCP pool or your VPN pool, something like that.
Okay, I worked in talent acquisition. Lesson 3 was not learned.
Yeah, I get it. Any questions about this one? Yes, sir.
What was the policy on account management?
The question was, what was the policy on account management? That you should manage them. So we did have a pretty robust IAM system. We had an IAM team. How did this slip through the cracks? Not 100% sure. Looking back at it now, just wasn't something we were looking at. We were kind of looking at all the stuff on the outside that could like come in because we had really sensitive information, and we were client facing. So we cared about client data. And sometimes we kind of miss some of the inside stuff because you're so focused on the outside threat, you never really look at the inside threat, right? So, and I think the system was so old that when we contacted our mail admins, they were like, oh yeah. They were like, dude, what does this thing even do? They're like, well, it monitors like up, down, but just on Exchange. We're like, really? Like not all the other stuff? So yeah. So it slipped through many years of like holes. I don't think a single person on our security team even knew existed. So know your assets too, other than your service accounts. All right, this might have been one of the bigger ones that I worked. The case of the anonymous libelist. We got contacted by our legal team, and they said, hey, one of our clients received an email from some random person that said, hey, you're doing business with this company, our company, and they are not authorized to do business in the state of New York. And by the way, they're under investigation by a 3-letter federal agency. None of this was true, by the way. But they sent it to our client, and our client went, wait, if this is true, you guys need to resolve this or we're not doing business with you. And to give you an idea how big the client was, I kind of looked them up. Last year, they did $90 billion in revenue. So it wasn't a small client. We were way smaller than that. So we were like, no, we cannot lose this client, but how do we convince the client that this is not true? The email came from, this company's still around, looked them up, but it came from a service provider called Hushmail. And Hushmail is hosted in Canada, but what was really funny about Hushmail was right on their terms of services, like they actually had this part where it said, hey, we're a Canadian company, US subpoenas don't hold any water over here. Just to give you an idea of like what kind of company it was and who used that service. So, you know, what are we gonna do about this? So the email came from a Canadian service provider. Our client was based in the US, we were based in the US. Legal team's like, what, we need to find out who did this. Like, dude, I'm not a wizard. Like, you know, the best I could do was look at their terms of services and say, hey, this person's kind of harassing a client, please shut them off. I was like, that's the best I could do. So as mentioned, you know, went through, like, tried to explain to our legal team that best I could do was try to send a terms of service violation to Hushmail. The email just kept coming, and you know, there was nothing in it like that we could latch onto. It was just some dude that just kept saying, you know, your company's this company's operating legally and you're doing business with them. So there was nothing to latch onto until there was. The final email contained an attachment. And we were like, yes. So we literally did this when we saw it. We're like, yes, this guy messed up. So it was a Word document. The Word document, it was kind of weird because all his emails basically said the same thing. All of a sudden there was this Word document. The Word document was supposedly like a news article. And it was sent to the News and Observer here in Raleigh and said, hey, this company is operating legally in New York and they're doing a business with this big client. You guys should talk about this. So we took that document, opened it up, we opened the properties, and right there had this big column where it says company. It was a hospital in New York. We were like, okay, that's a clue. But this part author right up here, even though this is populated, there was nothing in here, right? We did run the document through a tool called EXIF. I believe it's still around, but this was back in the Backtrack 4 days. If you guys know what I'm talking about, how old it is. But we ran it through and we got this part here, author. And the author was some iteration of first name, first initial, last name. And it was kind of unique. So let's see. I ran it through, I was like, all right, I should be able to get a hit on this if they were an employee of ours. So I ran it through our Active Directory and I actually got a hit. I was like, holy crap, it was an employee. And the weird part was he was an employee 3 years ago. Like, you waited 3 years to do this thing, but got a hit on it. And we're like, now I have a first name and last name instead of a first initial and partial last name, right? So I looked him up, found him on LinkedIn. LinkedIn said he worked at the hospital. That was in there. So I was like, oh, great. So he used his work computer to draft up an email to send false information to our client. And we basically have dead rights. Now, important thing when talking with lawyers, don't ever tell them that you know 100% that somebody did something. Just give them the evidence and let them figure it out for themselves, right? I did not want to be called as an expert witness on a case and have to defend everything that I had to do. So basically what we did was, you know, we bundled up all the evidence, we gave it to our lawyers, and then, you know, we kind of high-fived each other because we were pretty stoked about this. The fallout, we got a big pat on the back from our managers, but the lawyers didn't give us nothing. Lawyers don't share details, and that's why I don't like them, because you do all this footwork, and we're like, hey, what became of this? And you're like, you can't talk about it. I'm like, come on, man. Like, did all this work, and you can't give me some juicy details? But the rumor is that the user got a very, very scary cease and desist. And there was a rumor that one of the lawyers in the room said, we're going to destroy this guy's career. I'm going to go straight to his employer, and I'm going to say he violated or he abused company resources to threaten our client, $90 billion client, and we want something done about it. I don't know if that happened, but the emails stopped. So we're assuming something happened. Yeah. Lessons learned, again, legal team never shares anything. It helps to have members of your team that, it helps to have members of your team that know at least basic forensics. I didn't know about XF at the time, so thankfully my team member was like, oh, I know a tool, ran it through, and we got the other bit that we needed, right? Even ex-employees can be a threat. So I know this is about insider threat. It's kind of a stretch. But he did know a lot about our inner workings in order to be able to pull this off. And sometimes all you got to do is be patient and wait for the bad guys to slip up. So even though our lawyers are breathing down our neck saying, you guys do something, couldn't. Yes.
So the concern about the legal team never sharing the good stuff, the problem there is that's not a very good legal team. Anybody who claims something like we're going to destroy this guy's personal and professional life is actually not on the up and up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was a lot of side conversation, right? Because we heard that that's what they said. It's not like we were in a room and they were like, we're going to destroy this guy. They were like, hey, by the way, like one guy in the room said that this, I'm sure it was water cooler talk. I'm pretty sure that's all they got. The guy who got a cease and desist and that was it. Yes, sir.
That big of a client, believing just random out of...
Yes.
It's one thing to investigate. It's another thing to say, you'd think the state of New York would say something if you asked them about that.
Yes, and so there was a whole lot of, this could have went a lot easier, but I don't know what was going on. And, we had, when lawyers come barking, we're just like, drop everything, go do your thing. So, but yes, you're 100% true, 100% correct.
I know how easy it is, big decisions can screw people.
Yeah. Any other questions on that one? Yes.
Without the attachment, you never would have found them?
Question is, without the attachment, would we never found him? That is exactly what probably would have happened. Like, we had nothing on this. I mean, we had a username, we had, dates, it was just an email, so.
So even if you guys' account turned off by voluntary service, what stopped you from starting up a new one?
Exactly. So this is what I explained to the lawyers. I'm like, I'm chasing a ghost. I'm like, there's nothing preventing him to going over to Yahoo, doing the same thing till it gets shut off, doing it over to Gmail. So I was hoping the lawyers would have figured out. They probably just could have had some other method to validate to the client that this wasn't really occurring. But no, we're sitting there chasing this random person.
What was his financial incentive for doing that?
No clue. We're assuming he was just a disgruntled employee. I don't know if he got fired, but it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I mean, he targeted one client. The fact that he sent the email to the News and Observer here, I believe when I looked him up, he had actually lived here at one point, but he was in New York by the time he had actually started pulling all this. So we never found out what his incentive was for this. I mean, he wasn't going to make any money off of this. I think he was just trying to be a pain. So, yes, sir.
I'm assuming the News and Observer never ran the article.
We never saw it. Yeah, News and Observer never ran the article, of course, because they probably tried to go validate the story and was like, this is bunk.
They could be sued for running a bad article.
Right. Unlike our freaking client, $90 billion worth of revenue, couldn't even go validate whether we're being investigated or not. All right, last one. Call this the case of the eBay bandit. So some of the finer details, okay, one of my coworkers here, might be skipping on some of the details because this was kind of a multi-team investigation. So we found out that some of our equipment ended up on eBay and had been stolen. The equipment was mostly end-of-life stuff. So we had a policy, if you end-of-life something, you could use it for lab purposes or testing purposes. Definitely not for putting up on eBay though. So the equipment was loosely tracked. That was kind of one of the problems. Sometimes it wasn't tracked at all. And this occurred over months during the height of the pandemic. So, it was kind of rough. We didn't even know exactly how long this had been going on for. Identification. So the way we kind of figured this out was one of our team members came back into the office and went, wait, I had a bunch of equipment on my desk, where'd it go? So he started an investigation, and thankfully he had a list of all the serial numbers, model numbers for the equipment that had been sitting on the desk. And we actually had a team that was able to correlate those serial numbers to postings on eBay and went, there it is. And of course, the guy put the posting under his real name. So it was like, ding, we got him. All right. So turns out the guy was in our actual department. So we were tasked to review all of his documents to kind of correlate what was going on here, right? In his documents, he had the serial numbers, models of everything he had stolen. And so, it was pretty easy. Additional documents also revealed that he was in severe financial distress. This guy had his entire life, for whatever reason, on his work computer. We found stuff like, he was turning in his lease early on his car, so he's getting dinged for like $6,000 for that. There was some weird stuff about checks that were being written to some guy, but it was at the address that he was living in that we were able to figure out. There was a bunch of weird stuff going on. We knew he was divorced. It looked like he had bought a really fat diamond ring for his new wife, his fiance. So guy was just making really, really poor financial decisions, and he started stealing stuff. Fallout. So one or more of the buyers were notified that they were in possession of stolen equipment, and they were furious because they had to give it up. Upon first notification, when we finally identified who it was, we started disabling access, both physical and technical. Law enforcement was dispatched to his house, and apparently he just rolled. He's like, "Yep, it was me. Sorry." And he was terminated from the company. So lessons learned. One of our biggest gaps was our video footage didn't actually go back far enough to catch when he had first started it. So, we were rolling him over, but this has been going on for like, I don't think it was close to a year, but it was going on far enough that we started looking back and we're like, great, we have no video. Or might have had like one piece of video footage, but based on how much stuff ended up in eBay, he was obviously everywhere. But we did have badge access logs. So we were able to pull the badge access logs and see everywhere he was hitting. And he was going into buildings he had no business going into. The buildings were empty because of COVID, but he was like, going in that one, and coming out with equipment. One of the things we needed to really be sure is like our deprovisioning process for old equipment. Like we had no idea if the configs were wiped from these things, what data they had. So we needed to kind of shore that up. And this is kind of a funny one. So during the investigation, we were like, hey, what did the breadcrumbs look like? He's like, what breadcrumbs? He left entire loaves of bread. Like this wasn't a rocket science investigation, right? And again, our legal team doesn't share anything. So like they didn't tell us anything what happened with this one. So, any questions about that one?
So did you update your physical access controls methodologies there?
Well, the thing was, right, it's like he was authorized to be in the building.
Well, you said he wasn't authorized to be in the building.
No, they were actually. So sorry, I skipped that out. We every building that he went into, he was allowed to be in. It just, I'm sorry. It didn't make sense for him to be in them. So we did have access to all the buildings on campus, but unless you were there for a meeting, unless you worked there, there was no real reason for it, right? So yeah. Physical access. Now, I think we did kind of keep closer eyes on retiring gear. That was the big thing. And we did extend the video footage retention for that.
You have a question over there.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Hey.
Hi. Do you think that in this particular scenario, there was also a gap in any potential flags that could have come about indicating his financial situation had changed to that extent?
Yes. Well, should have been. In my summary. I'm going to get that. No, it's good. It's good. So in summary, it'll be in here though. Logs are your friend, and log aggregation is a bigger friend. So we're not talking about just machine logs. We're talking about physical access logs, like in this last example, right? If it wasn't for the badge access logs, it would have been a little harder to, obviously he put the stuff there in his name, but it helped. Suspicious and hostile employee behavior should be reported and monitored. So back to my first example, the guy who said he was not going to do change control and he was just going to start doing unauthorized changes all over, probably should have been reported. If appropriate, thorough background checks, including credit checks, probably would have been appropriate in this case. Now, does everybody do that? Of course not. My understanding is if you're going for a clearance, that is definitely one of the things they check. Had they done this, they probably would have found that guy with like a single-digit credit score and been like, I don't know about this guy. But it wasn't part of the onboarding process, so it wasn't part of the background check. Know your service accounts and monitor their use. Please enable MFA if you guys have not already done that. It's 2023. Get cybersecurity insurance. If you don't have it, look at it. It saved us a lot of money.
Thanks.
Retire your hardware securely and thoroughly. Assume your retired hardware is going to end up on eBay because they might. So make sure they're securely wiped. They don't have configs. They don't have sensitive data. There was an article recently where I can't remember what state it was, but it was cell phones that had been confiscated by local police departments were ending up being auctioned and they had not been wiped. And so some security researchers got a hold of it and they were like, oh, like I can see stuff.
Money for this stuff on Etsy.
Yes, Etsy. Don't use eBay, use Etsy. Yeah. Yeah, you can probably decorate, stuff. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that too, right?
You never know when someone's gonna get picked up and
Yeah.
police now have their phone and it's getting sold and
Yeah. I can't remember what state it was though. I want to say it was like San Francisco or something, but yeah, that was a pretty bad one. Supply chain companies, if you guys sell stuff, try to have a team that scours like auctioning sites, social media sites, stuff like that. Make sure your stuff isn't being sold. Have at least one security resource on your team that knows at least basic forensics. Obviously, it helped us out in that one case. Security insider threat training is great, but it's not the end all be all. The lady who leaked the social security numbers had to do our mandatory security training. Like, did not help in this case. Lawyers don't share anything. I'm going to keep drilling that in. Have an incident response plan and tabletop it. And most importantly, it doesn't matter how much training, equipment, technology, and personnel you've invested in, a determined threat actor will find a way, given enough time, effort, resources, and determination. And that is it. Any final questions? Sir.
You really don't like lawyers, do you?
Do I like lawyers? I actually enjoy talking to our legal team because they always think that, I'm going to bring up the wizard thing again. They seriously think we can pull some magic out of our butt sometimes. They're like, oh, my daughter's Twitter account got hacked. Figure out who did it. I'm like, no, that's not what we do. But I do enjoy talking to our lawyers. What I hate is like all of a sudden they lawyer up and they're like, oh, we can't share any of this stuff with you. I'm like, dude, I've worked 3 weeks on this. Like, you can't throw me a little tiny bone. So I'm like, over beers. Let's go have a beer and like tell me unofficially like what happened. Yeah. I'll sign an NDA.
I need to do better liquor than that.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, I was like, what's it gonna take? I'll buy you a bottle. I just want to know, like, did this guy pee in his pants when the cop showed up? And he cried. Did he cry like a little baby? Because we did not like this dude, and we really wanted to share those kind of stories. But yeah, yeah, that's it. Feel free to hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn. That's my email address. I really appreciate you guys' time. Thanks a lot.